Hello and welcome to LIVBRI Focus. It is pre-match build-up show time as Liverpool are once again in Premier League action. It'll be only just 72 hours since they last played when they take to the field against Brighton tomorrow evening, Wednesday night at Anfield. I believe it's a 8:15 kickoff. Of course, plenty has happened since then. Liverpool have been very, very busy in the transfer market, and we'll get on to what that means for the starting 11 later on in the video. But first of all, just in terms of an overall look at the game, I think this really is a must-win one for Liverpool. And I said that about the last game against West Ham, but it is just so important to preserve this momentum now we've got it going, especially going into that game against Manchester City, because that is very much the lifeline for the season. If we drop points here and we don't get the result I think we all know we need, which is a win against Man City at Anfield, then that is our role in the title race pretty much done and dusted. You know, it's a mad season and anything can happen, but once the gap gets to, 7 or 8 points or something like that, and you don't have a future game against that team you're challenging against to lean on like we do at the moment. Of course, when we're level on games played with Man City, the gap at the moment is 7 points, but we know we've got to play them at Anfield, and therefore we can claw that back a little bit and we can reduce it to 4 points, and then it becomes a little bit easier to put the pressure on them and kind of lie and wait for them to slip up and drop some points. But as I said, if the gap becomes bigger than that, then it really does start to become an issue, and we don't want to be going into that game against City at Anfield having already suffered a blow. We want to be going into it with, a buoyant mood, with confidence, knowing we've got our home form back. Of course, the last time we played at home was when we finally lost that record after 68 games, the unfortunate loss to Burnley. So we want to get things back on track there as well. And I think in general, Jurgen Klopp is very much looking at this second half of the season as a completely different block from the first one. It was interesting when he was talking about the game against West Ham. He said it was 2 wins down, 17 to go. He's kind of split away from the first half of the season, acknowledging almost that is obviously it's been and gone now, and we've got to focus on the run of form we're in at the moment and looking to carry that on into the future. But also it's going to be a very different campaign because of the personnel changes that have been made. We're not going into this second half thinking about how we can rotate between Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, maybe use Fabinho at centre half a little bit if things get a little bit crazy. It's a very, very different outlook now, and I think Jurgen has acknowledged that the first half of the season we got by, we did what we could, and unfortunately we didn't finish that half top of the league. But we can now look at this second half having made adjustments, brought players in. We have a bit more of an understanding of the exact situation we're in now, and think, well, the main priority now is do the best we can in the second half, maybe win the second half of the season, as teams sometimes do when they don't have a great first half of the game. You say, well, go out, win the second half and see where you are, win the second half of the season and just see what the final standings are at the end. So team news going into the game, of course, the arrivals of Ozan Kabak and Ben Davies have caused a huge stir. Those have both been confirmed now since I last put out a video yesterday evening, which is, of course, fantastic news. Jurgen Klopp spoke about both of them at length in his press conference today. He did say that this game comes a little bit too soon to play both of them together. Now, whether that's him, just slightly misusing his wording, of course, his grasp of the English language is developing all the time, and he does occasionally make slips of the tongue where he uses phrases that mean something different to us than they maybe do to him, and he's acknowledged that himself in his press conferences. He sometimes apologises and says maybe my English has stopped me from clarifying this point. But essentially he said that they weren't ready to play a game together, which could mean that he's interested in maybe using one of them in this game and doesn't just want to throw both of them in together as a centre-half pairing, because of course they need to develop some chemistry with each other. Or it could mean that just neither of them are going to play. I think it's no surprise that that neither of them are likely to start in this game. Certainly I would be very, very shocked if Jurgen did that, because he'll probably have 1, maybe 2 training sessions with them before the match, which is not enough time to really establish with these guys who've come from different backgrounds. Preston in the Championship and a struggling Schalke side in the Bundesliga do not play the same way as us, and of course we want to get them in as soon as possible. We can't really afford to dawdle at all in terms of blooding them into the side, but on the flip side of that is you don't want to throw them in completely cold. So I think this game comes a little bit too soon. It also unfortunately becomes too soon for Fabinho, although Dave Maddock in a piece in the Daily Mirror today said that it's highly expected expected that Fabinho will be back for the Manchester City game and will probably be partnered by Jordan Henderson for that match, which is an interesting little bit of early team news. But in the meantime, Fabinho will not be available for this game, and it looks unlikely that KABAK and Davies will be used, at least from the start. I would like to see them on the bench. You know, it would be good to see Jurgen just getting them into the match day routine. Obviously, integrate them into the squad by they have to do all the warm-ups, the travelling to the ground. They're in the dressing room, right in the thick of it. They really feel what it's like. And listen, however the game is going, maybe we do get to bring one or both of them on just for a little bit to give them a taste of what life in a Liverpool shirt is going to be like. So as for the players that I think are actually going to start for Liverpool in this game, in goal, it's almost definitely going to be the one and only Alisson Becker. In front of him, I think it's an unchanged back line. As I said, Fabinho not available for this game, a little bit too soon for KABAK and Davies, so we don't really have any other options at centre-half. It will almost definitely be Phillips and Jordan Henderson, both of them in great form after solid performances against Spurs and against West Ham as well, so we don't have too much to worry about there. Of course, Phillips is still a young and developing player, and we can see kind of erratic performances from them where one week they're really on it and everything goes right, and then the other week it's not quite happening for them, or the opposition have worked out a flaw in their playing style that allows them to exploit it and cause them a lot more problems than they had in the previous games. So it's no guarantee his recent form that he's going to do well in this game, but he will have that momentum now. He'll have that confidence and that self-belief, and for a young player that is still taking his first steps in the Liverpool first team, that will do him the absolute world of good. So I think it'll be Phillips and Henderson as your centre-half pairing. Either side of them, it'll probably, well, almost definitely be Andrew Robertson at left back and Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. Both of them getting into some really good form at the moment, which is great to see, and of course, unsurprisingly, coincides with Liverpool getting positive results as well. In front of them in the midfield, of course, Henderson being absent from the middle of the park means we are going to have to do a bit of jiggery-pokery here once again with what would normally be our standard first choice midfield three. I do think it is going to be a three for this game. We experimented a bit with the formation against West Ham. It was kind of halfway between a diamond and a 4-3-3. Shaqiri obviously playing a little bit further up, but still connecting at times with those players in the centre of the park. I think we maybe go back to something a little bit more traditional here just to facilitate the players that I think are going to play in this game. In the midfield, I think it will be Gini Wijnaldum in the holding role. He's doing brilliantly in there at the moment. Thiago then further ahead where he is playing absolutely fantastically. I think he's so much better as a number 8 is what we technically consider it to be in our system, but it's still slightly more defensive, a bit closer to being a number 6 than maybe other midfield roles are because of the nature of the way the fullbacks play. The number 8 still do a lot of defending and covering for those kind of spaces as Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson bomb forward, but he does look a lot better in the more advanced role within the midfield 3, Thiago, and I think we're going to see that again on Wednesday night. And then I think the midfield will be completed by Curtis Jones. James Milner, of course, has had a little bit of a resurgence in the side recently, started both the game against Spurs and the game against West Ham, played well in both. He was, of course, taken off reasonably early in the game against West Ham because there were concerns over his fitness. Curtis Jones replaced him and had a brilliant game by all means. Also made a good performance against Tottenham Hotspur, and I think with this being at home, we need that little bit more attacking impetus, and I think Curtis Jones will be the player that gives that to us. And then in front of that midfield 3, I think we're going back to the usual suspects. We've been experimenting a little bit recently. I think some of it is tactical, some of it is just rotation as well. Jurgen Klopp will have had the sports science guys in his ear, and they will have picked out the points in the season where rotation needs to be done. You know, in the early stages of January, we very much went with the same lads every single time. It was Mane, Firmino and Salah every single game because we had bigger gaps and they had rests either side of that period. We are now in a much more attritional period of the season, especially just the last couple of weeks and the next few games where the games have come so thick and fast that we have had to do a bit of rotation. But I think we've now put ourselves into a position where we can afford to actually throw all the big guns on the pitch at the same time. And also with that game against Manchester City coming at the weekend, you'd like to get Mane, Salah and Firmino all in a really good rhythm. And the best way to do that is get them all on the pitch and hope hopefully, fingers crossed, scoring some goals as well. So that is what I think the front three is going to be. So taking just a quick look at Brighton then, as it probably won't have escaped many of you, they got a fantastic result at the weekend. Their game kicked off straight after ours and they took Tottenham Hotspur to the cleaners. I think the 1-0 scoreline was actually pretty fair on Tottenham because they caused Brighton no problems going forward whatsoever, and at the back they were all over the show, and Brighton really should have scored more goals, and that's kind of been the story of their season, and maybe the reason that they have kind of got a false position in the Premier League. When you look at where they are, they're right down at the bottom. You'd be forgiven for thinking they're in a relegation scrap, but the way they're playing just doesn't really convince anyone of that. It doesn't look like they're necessarily struggling to put good performances together. They always give teams a good game, as we know from when we played them, and of course we ended up with that 1-1 draw where you can argue whether it was deserved or not. The way Brighton got their equaliser was of course very, very dodgy, but I think Liverpool didn't perform very brilliantly, and Brighton probably did deserve to get at least something out of that match. But the issue, as I said, they've had this season is they don't put chances away enough, and that happened again against Spurs, and that is of course hopefully a big bonus for Liverpool, because it means that you can almost go a bit toe-to-toe with Brighton, and obviously you'd expect that anyway. You wouldn't expect Liverpool to shrink off, but you think that maybe we can try and just give them a proper heavy metal football style game where we say, you know what, we're going to throw all our lads forward and you can try and attack us as well, and we'll just see who comes out on top, because we've got world-class finishers and they are struggling to find the net at the moment, even though they do create a lot of very high quality chances. That is of course a risk, because sometimes the nature of XG, I know some guys don't really believe in it, but it is quite interesting how it does play out, this idea that you can value a team's chances based on how many goals they should have scored, not just how many they did score. And what tends to happen is teams will go through periods where they underperform and don't score as many goals as their XG suggests, and then suddenly it all flips around and they score more goals than their XG suggests. Some teams like Liverpool are a bit more consistent. They generally go down the middle and score as many goals as they are supposed to in a game. And then you can look at a team like Manchester United, for example, who will often have a good run of games where they get a load of great results and massively outperform their XG, and then suddenly they can't hit a barn door and they keep spurning big chances and stuff like that, and the results tail off. That is the nature of some teams. Brighton may be like that. They may also just be a team that can't finish to save their lives and will consistently underperform. Time will of course tell, and tomorrow's game will tell. But like I said, I think given that they will look to get forward, they will look to give us a game, they'll leave space in behind as a result as well. And we can afford to maybe let a few chances go, because you'd expect them to miss a few, and obviously with a world-class goalkeeper like Alisson, you'd hope he'd save a few as well. But the great thing about Brighton is they are a brilliant side across the park. They can defend very well. They will look to have probably the same back five that they played against Spurs, which defended brilliantly. They will then look to get the ball forward, and they will do it effectively. They don't just lump it forward to a lone striker. They have a clear plan of how to break out from being under pressure and to create chances themselves. They're comfortable in possession as well. So they will come to Anfield with a lot of confidence. They will come to Anfield, especially off the back of that Spurs game, thinking they can get another great result on the bounce, and they will of course look to the fact that we have lost that home record now. That will probably make us a less daunting prospect. I think one thing that may work in Liverpool's favour though is the fact that it's such a quick turnaround for Brighton, and I know it's a quick turnaround for us as well, but some teams cope with those turnarounds better than others. Liverpool, because they have to deal with European matches as well earlier on in the season, are much more used to playing games 3 days after the last one. Brighton aren't so much, and even though Liverpool's squad has been depleted to the point where we can't rely on squad depth, our players are much more adapted to how they approach games when they're not at 100%. Liverpool are of course a brilliant team at 100%, and they can beat anyone in that state, and that is of course the ideal state that we want the players to be in. But they also know when they're not completely fit and when they are going to be a little bit off it because of the amount of games they've played, how to manage their way through that kind of match. Brighton aren't as experienced in those kind of situations, and as I said, if they want to go toe-to-toe with Liverpool, then they could almost overextend themselves without realising that they don't have the energy to play that kind of game, and Liverpool could pick them off as a result. So I think game management is really, really important in this game. It's really important that we do have Henderson on the pitch, that we we do maybe even get Milner on the pitch at some point, like I said, I think it'll be Jones from the start, but getting those vocal players who will organise, who will keep the players honest and help them manage their way to a good result, because like I said, the players, they are going to be a little bit flagging because of the fact that they did only just play 72 hours ago. But I do think it'll be a win for Liverpool. I think it'll be a good game as well. We've had a few of those recently. Spurs tried to give us a game, West Ham tried to give us a game. Long may that continue. We've got a run of matches now where it is probably going to be a bit more like that than Liverpool versus the dreaded low block. So hopefully that means we get another positive result to continue this run of form and take it into that absolute crunch clash against Manchester City on Sunday. But until then, that is all for today's video. So thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been around the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter as well. And I'll be back tomorrow with the post-match content after the Brighton game. Until then, bye for now.